In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the rear brakes on this Ford Excursion. Located right behind your rear wheel, so let's get started. Use a 21mm socket, remove all 8 lug nuts, and then pull the wheel off. Now with the wheel off, we can have a better visual of the caliper. And the first thing I will do is open up the bleeder screw. Use a 10mm wrench or socket. Also yours might have a cover on it. Mine does not. So pop the cap off, open it up. Before brake fluid starts dripping down, I'm actually going to attach a little hose that's routed right into my collection bucket so that it doesn't drip on the ground. You can also use a drain pan of some sort to collect it. Now use a pry bar, stick it right through the caliper opening here, and pry the pistons in. This is going to create space for the new brake pads. It'll also make it easier to remove the caliper because it won't apply pressure to the brake pads. You don't have to go all the way. We can finish compressing them, or the piston, once the caliper's off. With this open, give it a second just so that any air can bleed out. With that done, you can close it up. Snug it, take that off. Now you're going to want to remove the 2 bolts that hold the caliper onto the bracket. In my case, they are 12mm, and I don't believe that that's the factory size, so use whatever fits yours. Once again, for me, it's a 12mm socket. Leave one in so it can support the caliper while you remove the lower. Now remove them both and remove the caliper. The brake hose is fairly short, so you're going to want to pay attention and support it so it doesn't put pressure on it. You also might need a pry bar to help you remove the caliper from the pads. Sometimes it gets stuck. There we go. I'm going to put the caliper right up here on the backside where I won't put pressure on the brake hose. These pistons need to be pushed in just a little bit more now, so I'm going to do the same thing with the caliper off. I'm going to open up the bleeder screw, which now should be a little bit easier to do since it was not tightened a whole lot. Install this and take a dual caliper depression tool. Looks like this. Squishes on both pistons at once. Press these both all the way in. This should go nice and smooth. Go slow. If there's a lot of resistance here, that likely means that the caliper pistons, one or both, are seized and it needs to be replaced. Give this a second for any air to bleed out and then close it up. Put the caliper right back up here so it doesn't hang on the brake hose. Let's remove the pads. Sometimes you can slide them out like this. Other times you may need a pry bar to help push them out. Set them aside. Now use an 18mm socket, remove the 2 bolts that hold the caliper bracket onto the rear axle. Leave this one in a couple threads so it can hold it on while you remove the lower. Take this off, as well as this one. Remove the caliper bracket, set it aside for cleaning. Let's remove the rotor. If yours is stuck, use a hammer and tap it. The vibrations should break it free off the hub. Of course, make sure your parking brake is not engaged. That'll also hold it on. Mine is not stuck, so I'm going to gently slide it off. And there you go. It's important to clean the hub surface where the rotor mounts so that it can mount nice and flat when the new one goes on. And in my case, although it looks like it's bad, it's actually just surface rust. So I'm going to use a wire brush, scrape all of this clean, especially the inner lip here where the rotor sits. That's where it's more likely to seize onto the hub if it does. If yours is in much worse condition, you can use a sanding disc. Just make sure you don't remove too much material. Just sand off the rust gently. Once you have it scraped off, clean it off or rinse it with brake parts cleaner. At this point, I want to cover up the hub with some anti-seize, and that's basically going to finalize our procedure here until the rotor goes on and the brakes go back together. Now, just a side note, if your parking brake shoes look like this is just the backing of the shoe. There's no more shoe material left, and this needs to be replaced. However, for the purposes of this video, we are going to just install the brakes. These parking brake shoes will be replaced at a later date. If you're going to use the spray anti-seize, just be careful not to get it on the parking brake shoes. If you're using the brushed type, just try to basically keep it localized on the surface of the hub. Avoid the studs if possible. If you get some on there, no big deal, just wipe it off. Put your rotor on backwards. This will help you clean it better because it's going to be held on here. And you want to clean inside where the parking brake shoes ride, as well as on the outer braking surface, or I guess this would be the inner braking surface on the rotor, just so that any oils, fingerprints, whatever you got on there, come off completely. You want a nice clean surface for the pads to seat on. So use brake parts cleaner, spray it down, and a clean rag to wipe it off. Once you've done that, flip it over, install it the right way, put it all the way on, and we'll clean the outer braking surface as well. With our caliper bracket on the workbench, we have to do a few different things, but basically we have to clean and re-lubricate the whole thing. Starting with the slider pin. What you want to do is pull the old one out. Sometimes these boots get stuck. Use a little pocket screwdriver to help you unstick them basically from the top of the pin. Now, you want to make sure these aren't seized. Looks like this one is quite rusty, so it needs to be cleaned up. I'm going to use a wire wheel for that, get all the rust off. It's not great that it looks like this, but it's not too bad. It is definitely reusable as long as it cleans off. If I had any grease on it at this point, I would wipe it off. Clearly, I have none. And in here, I'm going to, well, there isn't any grease either, but typically I would wipe off any grease that remains inside of the caliper bore. Now, because this one is so rusty, what I will do is remove the boot, and with a bore brush, that's basically just a wire brush that I can put on a drill, clean all in here so I can properly reinstall this pin once it's cleaned up and have it slide in and out smoothly. Spray a little bit of brake parts cleaner in here. And then take that bore brush, clean it out. At this point, I'm going to dump all of this in a collection receptacle, flush it out with more brake parts cleaner, and then we can continue. Now that we have everything cleaned up, let's put it back together. I'm going to put a little bit of silicone paste. You can use brake grease if you want, but if you use silicone paste, make sure it's rated for high temperatures so it can withstand the temps that the brakes heat up to. And I'm going to lubricate the area where the boot slides in. Not only will this help it slide it in better, but it'll help it seal up a little bit better. And at this point, once the boot is seated, I will take that same silicone paste, put some inside the boot. Now remember, we had a caliper bore that was completely dry here. Now usually when you have a little bit of grease left, you probably don't want to put as much as I'm putting here, but mine was completely dry, so I'm starting from scratch. At this point, I'm going to add some to the slider pin as well. You can't put too much on the slider pin, because if you do, it'll just get pushed off as you put it into the caliper. And also put some on the top ridge here where the boot seals up on the other end. Slide it through. There will be air that gets stuck in here. You can use a little pocket screwdriver and open it up as you push. That's going to get all of the air out. Give it a couple twists, spin it around, push it, make sure it slides smoothly, and do the same to the other side pin. Now the anti-rattle clips, you want to remove the old ones, clean off the area with a wire brush or a sanding disc, whatever you have, or even a file. Just make sure you don't remove material from the caliper bracket, otherwise you'll create excessive play in the pads, but you want to remove the rust because rust will swell up, push the pads, and cause them to be stuck. Rinse it down with brake parts cleaner once you're done. Once it's dried off, apply a little bit of silicone paste or brake grease, whatever you have that you used earlier. Just a thin layer. You don't want too much because if you put more, it's actually going to squeeze out to the center here where the rotor goes. It's going to get on the rotor and therefore contaminate the brake pads, and that's not what you want. Once a thin layer has been applied, put your new anti-rattle clips right on, snap them on, make sure they seat fully. Then flip it over. We'll do the same to the other side. Reinstall the caliper bracket, line it up, and have your bolts ready. Start them on. Snug them up. The torque spec for these bolts is actually a range between 74 foot-pounds and 100 foot-pounds. I'm just going to go directly to 100. There's one. And two. You install the pads. None of these pads will get any wear indicators, so it doesn't matter which one you use where. Start them in at an angle and then kind of spin them around. That's going to get them lined up with their mounting location. Do the same to the inner pad. There we go. Reinstall the caliper. And have your bolts ready. Start them on through the caliper onto the slider pins. And start in the lower one. Torque these to 20 foot-pounds. Let's get the wheel back on. Reinstall all 8 lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern so we can seat the wheel correctly, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 148 foot-pounds. Now 148 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Here we go. There we go, double check them if you want. Take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.